All right, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Elmarie Wood, and I'm here with another group of my friends, and we're going to talk about another topic that is near and dear to us, women in horror. We embody this topic, so I can't wait to have the conversation. So let's just jump in. I'm going to start with the first person on my screen. Linda, can you introduce yourself?
Washoa. So I'm Linda Addison. I write a lot of poetry, short fiction, just jumping into the novel land, which is wild. Won a lot of awards in horror. And yeah.
Excellent. A lot of awards in general. Rena, can you introduce yourself now?
Hi, I'm Rena Mason. I am mostly known for writing horror and also working in other genres right now. And I have won a few awards, and that's pretty much it. A screenwriter also working on that.
Like, please don't make me pull these things out of you guys, honestly. The modesty is wonderful, but let's, all right, the next person on my screen is Lee.
Oh my God, these girls are so humble. I'm in this group of powerhouse women, and I got a few awards. I know, Lee. It's hard. It's going to be hard, Lisa. My name is Lee Murray. I'm a writer, a poet, a screenwriter, essayist from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I have also won a few awards, and I'm going to scream my own, scream out my latest achievement, which is I've just won the New Zealand Prime Minister's Award for Literary Achievement in Fiction, which is absolutely huge, and it comes with money. So I'm real, and I'm the first Chinese New Zealander ever to achieve that. So for me, it's just a huge, and also genre writer. So I feel super proud, and I'm skiting now. Sorry, I'll be quiet.
This is fantastic. All of you could be like,
great.
Because this is fantastic. That's wonderful, Lee. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much. I'm really proud. I'm so proud.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you should be.
Yeah, and my mummy, you should see my mummy. Oh my goodness, she's so proud.
You got to post that picture. You got to post that picture because I can only imagine what her face looks like.
Oh, honestly, I've been elevated somewhat in the ladies' book club. My daughter.
Absolutely. You know that. You'll have a title when she's talking to people. So, Rhonda.
I am Rhonda Jackson Garcia, aka RJ Joseph, and I write a whole lot of stuff, creatively, academically. I'm also a teacher, so you can probably tell here, and I'm really excited to be here with these buddies.
And Cena.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. My friends call me Cynthia Pelayo. I am the first Latina in history to win a Bram Stoker Award. It's the honor of my life. I am also an International Latino Book Award winning author. I've been nominated for the Elgin Award several times. I write poetry, genre blending, fiction, essays, journalism, you name it, I do it. So
yes. Y'all are fantastic. It's just, because I think you all are just, you're my buddies, so I don't think of you in this light all the time. But when I get to hear it like in front of me at the moment, all in one batch, it's kind of cool to listen to you all. You guys are just amazing. You blow my mind. So let's just jump in and talk about this. We're women.
Excuse me, who are you?
Yeah. Well, I'm the moderator for today.
I was just thinking the same thing.
I'm going to do the same thing you all did, though. I'm going to say I'm Elmarie Wood. I've won a few awards. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, boy.
Well, I'm a psychological horror author, and I live and breathe horror. That sounds creepy. Now let's change that a little bit. But I love to write horror. That's what I like to do. And horror is usually in like pretty much everything I write. But I write different genres. But I'm always got that undercurrent of terror in some way. Poet, screenwriter, essayist. It's weird to say the poet and the essayist. I wasn't usually that, but I am now. And novelist and short story writer, all that stuff. So I kind of write it all. But okay, so we're women. We write horror. Some people are surprised by this, even today. Why do you think this is? Why is this a thing?
Oh, Rhonda and I have spoken about this so much, and
Yes.
I want to hear, I want to hear your thoughts because Rhonda has written about this even at the academic level about the woman as monster because we've talked, and so I would love to,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, I would love to hear your thoughts on
Yeah,
this.
well, and it's so funny because I'm always running my mouth. I'm sure that Linda and Lisa have also heard these words. But
Hear it again.
I think that it really boils down to the fact that I think we just as people just aren't ready to think about women as being anything other than nurturers of life. That it's very discomforting. It's a very very disturbing thing to think about women as being capable of causing harm, of being monstrous, and of doing these things. Because in order to accept that women are capable of that, I believe that it opens up the door for so much that would have to shift in response. So, as a result, I think a lot of people just kind of go, oh no, she could never be capable of that. She would never do that. Like, women are supposed to be the givers of life. They would not take life, which of course helps for real women monsters. Right? We get a lot of cover that way. But I think it's just really too disturbing for a lot of people to even fathom.
Listening to you say this, that's why I just want you to say it anytime you can say it. What just occurred to me is something that never occurred to me before, and that is that violence, or I mean, not all horror is violence, but it's gone wrong. It can be violent, it doesn't have to. Mine is psychological. But it occurs to me that violence equals some level of power that equals male.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And it never
Absolutely.
occurred to me until just listening to you now,
Yeah.
why it would be so hard. It made me think also about I think it's called the Cinderella thing or something like that, where a man who has a wife, and then when she's pregnant, all of a sudden she's not sexy anymore because she's a mother.
Oh,
And
uh-huh.
mother is a lot for a lot of people, but especially male.
Mm-hmm.
For them, mother, like you said, is nurturing. And so for mother to be dangerous is kind of hard. I mean, and for even now, I mean, another quick one, and I'm gonna stop, is I just started playing D&D. Don't ask. Dungeons and Dragons. A friend of mine plays it, and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" Well, now I'm like half barbarian, and anyway, and all I do is kill. Because there's a lot of things. There's a lot of characters in D&D, but it's all magic and a lot of rules. And I just got in, so I was like, "Okay, I'll be barbarian. All I gotta do is kill." And I'm playing with only guys, and they're all like,
Really? So you're
I mean,
seeing that response?
not in a way of like, we don't want you here. In a way of like when I say, we're playing a thing, and I'm like, I'll go first because I'll kill, and how are you going to kill? I'm going to rip their heart out. I'm going to chop their head. And they're like, and I don't think that it startles them so much because it's a thing. I think it's because I'm a girl, and they're like, you really want to
Absolutely.
kill us like all the time? Let's go.
Yeah,
So
sorry, go on.
No,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I think that's really interesting that Linda is saying this because, for me, I think that horror is a natural place for women because we have always walked on the margins. We've always been tiptoeing over eggshells, watching what we say and what we do, because there's that undercurrent of male violence, as Linda says. And I think that's been recently a change. So it's not just enough for us to have a voice. Horror is the natural place because we know that world, right? We've
Right.
walked it, but it's not enough just to have a voice now. We're having an angry voice. We're raging. It is time for change, and that's really interesting that you, Linda, are taking a scythe to characters, because I feel we're in a moment of absolute. It's not just about let's have a voice. It's also let's have not just a voice. Let's make some change, and I feel that we're right now we've had this conversation before, but I really feel we're on a tipping point now with just the way things have gone politically and, you know, globally. The environment for women has never been more precarious. So I think that horror is the place. That is a place we've always walked. We understand it, and here is just that element of safety. We can be angry. I've just been reading Rhonda's, you know, Hell Hath No Sorrow again, because Samiko sent me there saying, you know, you need to go there. And I was looking for some examples of mental health and in horror, and Rhonda's work is perfect for that. So I was rereading it, and it's not just the voice. It's the absolute fury. The fury, I think, is what I'm catching now, just in this moment. So I think there's I don't know, just a tipping point right at the moment, and it seems even more relevant than ever to be having this conversation.
So I'm curious though, do we feel that even if it's a tipping point and I agree with you with that, and we're in this space naturally, but who's accepting the reading? Because that ends up being the question a lot of the time. Are women saying, yes, this is our time, bring on the fiction, let's read it because we understand it? But are the men saying the same thing?
Well, I think they are. Otherwise, how do any of us get these awards? We're not getting them because just women are voting for it.
Right, definitely true.
You know, what I think is so funny is because I've been in this so long, and when I started, there were very few women and very few anythings other than, and you know what I'm saying. And and there was and I remember having a discussion at World Horror with women who were all at that time being told that they can't write horror and getting all kinds of pushback. No one's ever pushed back on me, but that's because maybe I'm the oldest of 9 and 7 brothers and I ain't going there. I ain't taking it. But anyway, it might be my aura. But I mean, I don't know if that's still happening. I'm very curious if anyone's had that experience, because I haven't. But like I said, I'm kind of rough and ready, so.
I think for me, people have always been surprised that I do push back. And I'm kind of like, I'm a woman of color, for one. I'm like, I think people forget. Like, if there's anyone that can write from a place of horror, of knowing the existence of horror, it's going to be a woman of color. And I'm always surprised that other people are like, well, what do you mean you know horror? I'm like, I grew up in inner city Chicago. I know horror, and I know what it's like to constantly be told that I should speak a certain way, I should act a certain way, I should look a certain way. It's just like I get it's like a 360, you know, being dissected in not only in my family, but then in greater society of what I should be. And so it's like, well, I know the horror, like literally I know what the horror of existence is just because of who and what I am.
Well, yeah, and we're perfectly situated for it. Like you, Sina, and Lee both have said, we're perfectly situated for it. Like who knows the horrors of everything besides someone who has to learn how to move subversively in order to not draw too much attention to themselves, in order to learn as much as they can without letting people know that they know this stuff. That actually makes for the most intriguing kind of horror, I think, because it's very hard won and it's very raw. And for some of us, it's kind of a lifelong thing. Like I think about, you know, when we're little girls and we're, you know, I grew up here in the South, Southern Baptist, and I was always told, ladies don't do that. Little girls don't do that. Okay, then I got to be a teenager, and then it was, oh my gosh, you're terrible. You're tempting all the men folk. They don't know how to control themselves. It's you're the problem. You know, that I was pregnant a lot. I have a lot of kids, you know, so then there's all this thing. And then there's kind of worrying about raising the kid. And so now I'm in perimenopause, and that is like the worst of all the nightmares. Like if y'all haven't been there, I'm just gonna tell you, it is not cute at all.
I'm entering there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oh my gosh.
Early menopause for me
Yes.
was what catapulted The Evolutionist, which was my first novel. It basically is a story about what what if I'm not going through menopause? What if it's actually something else? So to me, it was a way to answer that. And as also as being one of the only minority people in the area that I lived in Las Vegas at the time, I got to write what that felt like as sort of a metaphor, for, being a minority woman in this life. Like, and so it all started with what I'm going through right now. My body changes and everything. What if it's not menopause? What if it's something else? And so I took that and I ran with it, and that was where it all came from. So yeah, no, that was horrifying. I can totally relate, because what's finally coming out at last is more women are talking about it, and more doctors are actually addressing that menopause is real. It's not just hormonal, it's mental, it's physical, all these changes, and it can last for decades. Because I've been premenopausal since I've been in my 40s, which is hereditary, I find out from my mother. So it's been, slowly over time, and it comes to a certain maximum point there, and hopefully it'll start fading out. But I've been going through it for a long time, and it really stinks. But
it's
there's
horrific.
a horror is a great avenue.
It's a very, and what I think of it too is, because it's so far behind me now. Literally, I am the oldest one here. Anyway,
lucky.
The thing is, to me, is that it's like also psychological, because I've written poems and stories to talk to this, and of course they were dark, about the idea that now you're valued less. That okay, you're the wise woman, but you're no longer sexy. You're no longer which is BS. But it's something when you go through it, though, you have to face that. You have to look at it and see what the limitations become all of a sudden. You're not making babies anymore. In what society on this planet doesn't that sound like a put down? So it's a psychological, emotional adjustment and horror.
Yes.
It's funny you mentioned that. I had a birthday just recently, and I had to, like, get myself together, because I was like, when you look at movies, a woman my age it's wrong, but they're casting that person as a, just gray-haired, hunched over.
The crone.
Yes, okay, I was trying not to use that word relationship to me. But, and I'm like, that's not who I am, but I am that age. And what does this mean? And I really had to, and I don't know that I'm over it. I'm not sure. The birthday was recent, so I really could still be there. But the mindset does shift. And to go back to the question I had asked before, in the world outside of, because we can live in a bubble when we're talking about horror stuff. We have our, we're in the Horror Writers Association, all of us together. We do all these things in sort of clumps, the conventions and all the speaking engagements. But in the world, when I go out, because I go out and I'm talking to people, and it'll inevitably come up, and they'll ask me what I write. And then I will say, psychological horror. And they're like, immediately they do that. They're like, what? And I'm like, why is that a reaction? How can that literally be the reaction?
It's that Brussels sprouts look, isn't it? It's like, oh,
and you just kind of like, and so when I ask a couple of people, that I felt like we have a few minutes, we can talk about this, they would say, well, I don't read horror fiction. And that's one argument. If I'm talking to a specific person, they'll say, well, Black people don't read horror fiction. Different argument. But most times, and almost inevitably, what comes up is, well, women are writing horror fiction. What are you talking about? Who? I don't even know any horror authors except, and they, we all know who they name. And I'm always like, listen, Anne Radcliffe, we started the genre, Gothic fiction, work. It was all Bronte. All of it was that was horror. That was the precursor to horror, and we started it. Mary Shelley, who do you think wrote Frankenstein? I'm like, I don't really understand what's going on, because it's almost as though people forget that. We talk about Frankenstein, we talk about the work, but we forget that a woman wrote it, or ignore that a woman wrote it. And Gothic fiction, by the way, was written by women for women.
mhm.
We
Yeah.
wanted so very much like Linda's talking about, let's just be this whatever beast you just mentioned, let's go kill all the time. We were clearly like, give us the material that lets us read about the killing. We want it, right? If you can throw some love in there too, Gothic fiction is fantastic. So if you just
Maybe it's just put your finger on it there, Lisa, going back to the question about who's reading it, who is reading it. And I think maybe it's us, it's women. Here we are talking about perimenopause, and we can all connect with that. We get it, because we're experiencing that. And so I think maybe that it's other women. And if I look at the Bram Stoker Awards, a couple of years ago, I was very lucky to take the Short Fiction Award, and in that section, it was the first time ever that all the nominees were women. And then the next year, last year, all the nominees for anthology were women, and they were 2 women each, like in all of the, those anthologies, and well, apart from Ellen, I think, but basically 2 women for each. But that's a lot of women involved, and several of those were women-only anthologies. Yep. And then this year, I'm looking at we haven't got to the short list yet, but the long list in long fiction is all women. So maybe it's us, maybe we're the groundswell, maybe it's having role models like Linda, just that little bit ahead of us, saying, you can do this, look, I can do this, you can do this. Maybe that Linda's just kind of set the bar and said, you have permission to do this, and if you bring it, they will come. So that might be it. And the other side is there might be a shift a little bit in publishers. So I've got a collection, a poetry collection coming out, and my current publisher is very keen to move it away from horror. And I keep saying, but it is horror, but it is horror. And, but I think how can we package it so that it is more mainstream are reading it? And maybe that's just an innovation thing in order to get, once they're hooked, then we bring them. Does that make, it's just what are the strategies for bringing, every mum over to horror? Because we know it, we see it, we recognize it. So as soon as we sample it, then we will want more. And I think that's what's happening within our little circle, and maybe it's snowballing. Well, that's what I'm hoping anyway.
I think a big part of it too is every single person in this panel right now has done some work to push up others, right? Whether it's, Rhonda's incredible nonfiction, not that your other work isn't, I love all your work. Everyone here is willing to stand for who they are. Cinna in Chicago, your culture. So to stand up and be a face willing to say it instead of trying to hide behind and be more demure is what is also changing things.
There's a lot of visibility. And I think that this is kind of what happened with the romance genre when paranormal romance started becoming a thing. It was like, we don't want to say that these are monsters. We don't want to say, that this is horror. So we're going to call it paranormal romance, or even, I think it was an urban fiction, maybe, or it was one of those things, right? And so I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is horror. Like, what do you mean? So it might be, Lee, that this is just the beginning to make it just a little more palatable, I guess, for wider audiences, before we go like just straight, splatter punk on everybody, I guess.
Well, something that was done too. Charlie Jacob, you know what? She didn't mind being splatter everything.
Yes.
She was a fiend. I love that. So, but I think it's just so much. I think Cynthia, I keep saying Cynthia because I see your name written that way. But you're doing interviews now with other horror writers. Again, the visibility, to be able to stand in place and say, I can do what everybody can do and still be, have a uterus or not. That's not the only thing that makes you female. But, I can represent female and do all these things, interviews, nonfiction, and the collections that, you guys, Lee and Rena and all that stuff, and everything that you're doing, Lisa, you created this panel. So everything like that is working against the psychology of the society. The society is hard to change. Bell Hooks wrote a whole thing about that, and I've read all her books about how it's built in, whether it makes sense or not, for women to have this role and men to have that role. And to fight that is a journey, but we're doing it. We're all doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, even I was gonna say mentors. Mentors have been, I mean, I look to and mentors and people who are of inspiration. I mean, Linda is for me has been like, you know, monumental in my life. And I've been you know, I've had the honor to mentor for HWA. And it's even as of recently, one of my mentees, who is a woman, said, asked me, can I write this? And I was like, of course, because she was worried she was going too dark. I was like, why you can, if it feels right to you, you have to write it. Don't feel, and her worry was everybody else. What will people say? I'm like, who cares? You cannot care about what they're going to say, what they're going to think. And I think that's kind of where I've been more visible. And the more visible you get, the more noise there is, but you cannot listen to the noise. You have to stay true to yourself as an artist, because you're going to be happiest creating what resonates with you.
Yes.
You know, some of that you just mentioned, you know, can I write this? You know, that concern that people are having, that's very, very real. I mean, it's not just, I mean, think about, you know, we've all known women who've made the decision that they're not going to have children. They don't want to have children. And then there's this response from society, from male and females alike. There's a response, and it's frustrating to me to see that, because it's I mean, that's what where's the requirement written that you're supposed to be, you know? And so when people wonder, should I write this? Should I say this? Can I go that dark? Can I, whatever it is? I wonder, you know, because that's like ingrained in you.
You know, no, but at the same time, it's story. Like, I think if a story is calling out to you, like, write me, you have to do it no matter what. And I just realized, I went back recently and I started reading East End Girls, which is a novella that I wrote. That book starts out with an abortion scene, like going down in the East End, that is happening between, you know, a medical student and a prostitute, and it's pretty graphic. And now I see why Publishers Weekly said, if you like gore, then, you know, this book is for you, because that's the way it starts out. But that's how I wanted the story to go down. And if you're reading that and it's like, okay, you're going to know right away this book is not for you. But me, I feel like I did the story justice, because you had to see that my character went there in order for her to do what she did, you know, and change throughout the story. I had to start it there. So, I mean, and I've never held back or thought, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. I've always just written the story first.
I hope this encourages people who wonder about that, because
I think so. Just do it, you know.
Fantastic work. You know, and
maybe don't title it something bad.
I mean, you know, but have you ever thought about a pen name? Because you don't want to go a certain place, and you know,
I'm gonna for romance. I'm gonna write. I'm working on a YA romance, and that I have to have a pen name for, because I'm mostly known for writing horror, and I don't want somebody to. That's just out of responsibility. I don't want some younger kid to pick up one of my horror books and, you know, be like, oh wow, this is not what I thought what I was gonna get, you know. So
I write little Fred and I use my own name. So,
but
you know,
I've always tried to figure out how
you got it, because you could be somebody could look at your name and be like, it's a guy. So
yeah, isn't it? Aren't I lucky?
You're passing. You just passing, that's all.
But like, how do you navigate signings if you're using a pen name? You know what I mean? If you're going to a signing, if you're going to a genre specific convention, maybe. Then
I don't know. But I'll just sign with the pen name, I suppose.
Yeah,
you know?
well,
I
was published in romance first.
Yeah.
And so I was published under Rhonda Jackson Joseph, right? And so when I actually started taking off in horror, it was necessary, because my horror is completely different from my romance. I'm not that paranormal romance chick. I love to read it. I don't write it, right? So I had to have a pen name, but also I'm Southern, and I'm Black, And when I first started writing, it was just not the thing that you wanted to do. You didn't want people to just be able to say right off, you know, oh yeah, that's who you are. So it gave me a minute. It gave me a little bit of a cushion. But when I go to events, it just depends. I think about, who am I today? This is a romance thing. Okay, so I'm Jackson Joseph. Oh, this is an academic thing. Okay, I'm Jackson Garcia. Oh, this is a horror thing. Okay, so I'm RJ Joseph. I think that when you put yourself in the mindset, especially when you have those divisions. Now, of course, if I were fancy like some of y'all and I was doing like cross genre stuff, then it really wouldn't matter as much. But my stuff is pretty dark and it's pretty horror centered on its own. So yeah, so I always thought that would be necessary. Plus I speak at elementary schools sometimes, and kids are, for their career days, and kids are very, very savvy nowadays. And as soon as you tell them your name, they go to look for you. So I'm like, if I don't tell you the name I write under, then you won't know, because you can't find me.
You know, early in my career, like way before I was published and anyone even knew anything about me, and I was writing a lot of science fiction, fantasy, trying to get an Asimov science fiction magazine. That was my goal. That was like all I wanted long time ago. And I took a workshop. I always tell this story because it was really changed. It was a real change in my life for me. Taking a workshop with Nancy Kress in New York. And, you know, she's award-winning sci-fi writer, everything. So talking to her afterwards, I said to her that I've been getting rejected from, you know, Asimov science fiction things a lot. And I said, maybe I need to change my name to LD Addison so they don't know that I'm a girl, you know. And so like if I write a story and it's from the character's point of view, they won't assume the character's a girl. You know what she told me? She said, if you write it well enough, it won't matter. I was like, okay. That's what I did. And that's what I did. I learned to write better. So that the characters were not assumed. It took me some years, but I did get into Asimov's like 3 years in a row. So, I mean, since then, I have not considered, you know, using some other name. I'm not at any point drawn to some areas like, you know, other of you are saying. So I don't think I would, but I understand why people do. I totally understand.
Yeah, I think everyone has a different comfort level in terms of bravery. I mean, you women here are some of the bravest women I know, but not everyone is in that position, you know, and not everyone is in a privileged position. They may be in a relationship where they're not safe, you know, so some things can't be said or done. And so, you know, in some ways, I think that the fact that there is work out there that those people can tap into and be inspired by, or at least see themselves, is really important, which means that we just need to keep the work going. We need to expand, because I do think that not everyone is as lucky and as brave as the people in this room, for example, you know.
Let me ask you something, as though I had not been asking otherwise. Let me ask you a question that might be a little difficult to answer. Should men only write men and women only write women?
I'm just going to say straight up no, because should I always write Black? Should I always write people who, you know, their genetics also include slave owners? Should I only do this? No. I think you have to respect wherever you're writing. If it's someplace you're not comfortable with, and do the research, you know, do what you need to do to make sure you're not doing, you know, like blanket things, and you include the fact that everyone's human. I have had this discussion where I did a talk at the U of A to some writers, and one of them an older white man felt very cautious about wanting to write something other than himself. And I said, you just need to take the time. You can't, I didn't say don't be lazy, but you just got to take the time to delve into what that means to be other than you. Because literally, dude, you're white. I didn't say that. But I was like, so you know what? And then I ended it by saying, because I happen to believe this to be true, but no matter what you are, you're human.
Yeah.
So when you're writing a story and the character is human, if they're not, then that's, you know, you work with that. But if they're human, then everything you write, the person has something they need. What are they willing to pay for it? What are the things that hold them back? It's going to be different depending on the way your character looks, but that's the dance is the same.
And there are, I think that where the problem comes, because I think that everybody should write whatever, like write whatever makes you feel happy. That's great. I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum. But I think that where the problem with that whole thing comes is that, like, I was once, I had an exam copy of this book of short stories about young people in high school, because I'm always looking for stuff, you know, with different characters and stuff for my students to read. And I was reading this book, and it was stories about inner city young people of color. And it just wasn't the greatest, right? Like, it had the mechanics right, the grammar was okay, but I was like, would Black and brown young people really talk like that? Like, no, I have a house full of them. I work with them. This is not. And so when I looked at the writer, the author was actually their teacher. And I found myself just shelving the book, because all I could think about was, there comes a point, though, if you're not going to bring any research or that authenticity, you should be able to recognize your privilege. And I wondered how many of his students had he asked to write their own stories. Right. So I'm like, he had the perfect opportunity to let them write their own story. So I think the problem comes when, if there is a guy that's writing women and you have publishers that would rather have his rendition of women, as opposed to these that are, you know, something that is written authentically. I think that's where I start having the problem. It's like, you mean to tell me you're gonna take on this book where somebody's writing about Black people, but I am a Black people and I write pretty okay too. I think that's kind of where I start to kind of draw the line, because I was really upset, and I just refused to use that guy's book in my classes, because I was like, this is whack. Like, you didn't do it right. They don't even talk like this. I'm not even from New York, and I know that kids don't talk like that.
We're gonna bring whack back, folks. That was awesome. We gotta bring it back.
Yes, whack stays here in the South, you know.
It was in a lot of graffiti in New York on the ground, on the walls.
Yep, exactly.
I agree with Linda. I think you have people, and Rhonda, everyone has a right to write whatever they want, but you should also be prepared that there might be a response if you treat something without care. If you write something from a stereotypical, perspective, you have to be prepared that there will be a response. There's a response to our work when we write about ourselves and our own identity and our own homeland. And so I think that's the disconnect. It's like, I'm always saying, write what you want, but you're not free from, no one is free from criticism. The novel I have coming out in March, it's about, I wrote about immigrants to Chicago in 1915 from Eastern Europe. These weren't Hispanic, these were people from Poland, Ireland. And so I wanted to write about that immigrant experience at that time. Like, what was it like for them here? And so, I had to do my research and learn about these families and learn about how they left poverty there to live in poverty here. And so, I tried to take it, look at it from a perspective of kindness and care. It's just like I would expect if somebody would to write about a Latina, that they would look into my background or people like me and what does that mean? What's my experience like?
Well, Lisa, we went round sort of with this on the novel that I'm revising. I'm still revising this character that originally it was a Black character, and I told Lisa I didn't feel good about writing it because I knew I could do better, because there's certain nuances and things that I wanted to get right, and I wouldn't have been able to get it right. So I changed the character to to have a different background, one that I'm now into a whole new rabbit hole, researching and whatnot, so that I can get it, very more authentic and whatnot. So, I mean, there's that too. There has to be a point where I think as authors, it's like, okay, I can research the crap out of it, but if I feel uncomfortable writing it, then I feel like it's going to show, it's going to come
Yeah.
through. So, I mean,
1000%.
there's the point. And I mean, and this novel has been done for a while, and I'm just, I've been revising it for a long time now because I want to get that character right. And so I felt good. And even though Lisa said you could do, you could do this, it would be fine. It's not gonna, I probably could have done it, but I feel better not doing it. So let's just put it that way. So as
It's
an
the most
author,
important
it's
thing.
great to try different things, but if it's at any point makes you uncomfortable, like, I don't think I'm going to give this the justice that it deserves, then, or if you feel like it's going to open up not just something with you, but I don't know, it was pretty heinous. It was crimes that happened back in it, and I just didn't want to rehash anything. And in that way, so I just created a whole new thing to sort of be my ghosts, basically, instead of where I was taking the ghosts from. I felt like I was stealing. So, there's that too. So, I mean, even me as a minority person, I have that feeling. So, I mean, other people should, you know, I think as a writer, where your limits are.
Mhm.
And I think I
You're
wish
being
more people, I
mindful.
guess. Yeah, I
It's
wish more
being
people would do
mindful.
that,
Mhm.
and it's not just a matter of like, getting other readers, minority readers to read your work and, proof it. It's not just that. It's just something inside, I think, as an author that you know or feel like, I just don't feel right about doing this. And just pass. And if you're really creative, you can come up with another idea which, I mean, I kind of did, and now I'm down a whole nother rabbit hole with that, but I feel better about it. So in case you were wondering where I was at with that, Lisa.
No, I
that's
want to
where-
say, I want to say that I did not bring this up with the intention of looking at you, right? But once you started, I'm like, here we go. It really feels this way. Like, honestly, and the story was magnificent. And yes, and the thing she pulled from was heinous, but it was magnificent. And she's a wonderful writer. So I was like, what are you talking? But listen, again, she pulled that same card on me and said, I don't feel right. She said that then, and what can you say when you don't feel right? You have to go with your gut. But that was not intentional. I mean, maybe
No, I know,
maybe it
I
wasn't
know.
intentional. I don't
But
really
I had
know.
to, I had to discuss. I had to discuss because there are some people out there that would
Yeah.
just go for it, and it's great to go for it, but there's
Yeah.
got to be that something that holds you back. Like, and if you get that feeling, then maybe take a little pause. Before you hit submit everywhere, take that little pause and it's like, is this right? Do I feel right about this?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's
The
the other
prob-
side of what Sina was saying about, mentees saying, can I write this? And you've got permission to write it. At the end of the day, you just still have to feel comfortable within your own skin that,
Yeah.
and proud of the work that you've put out, that it's saying what you want it to say. And sometimes, there can be a disconnect, and we do have to be careful about that. I think it's interesting because, I've had a number of mentees as well, and it isn't the boys saying, can I write this? It's often the girls. And I think it's because we have so many constraints on our lives, as Rhonda was saying, girls don't do that, good girls don't do that. That's not how we behave. And particularly when we're walking through horror, and it is not, it's quite visceral, and it really is effective, isn't it? And so I think we think twice, don't we? But now I'm just sort of feeling just in recent times, perhaps it's the Roe versus Wade being overturned, and just this undercurrent of change, and we're going to go there, and we're going to dare a little bit more. I feel it's coming, and I'm certainly seeing that in the sort of number of women writing horror and just being a little braver. So
I have another hard question. This one I can't, like, I'm so excited about because it should be a really good discussion. Okay, the yellow wallpaper.
oh
Did
gosh,
it
yes.
hurt? I know. I said it was a hard question. Did it hurt us or did it help us?
First, tell me what the yellow wallpaper is.
She's in the room and the wallpaper's happening and her husband won't let her leave the room. And
Yes, she just had a baby.
Yeah,
I thought it was about I got
attic.
postpartum depression
Yeah.
is what that was. What did they call it? They actually gave it a name in the Victorian times. And they kept them in a room. They kept them in a room. Confinement. It was like confinement too. Even after they had the baby, they always had like a wet nurse to take care of the baby and feed the baby, and the women had to stay like in the room. And basically, it was she was going through postpartum depression and went kind of mad. And she thought that there was people behind the wallpaper that were talking to her and stuff, and because they left her in there instead of what nowadays
I'm sure you've read it, Linda. It's by Charlotte Perkins. It's very Poe-esque, this creeping
it's so good.
Sort of creeping horror of suspense of there's a woman caught behind the wallpaper in the tangle of the tendrils of the patterns. So
I'm not sure I have, but I just brought it up. I will.
It's like it's a novel. It's a novelette or something. It's pretty short.
It's a short story. Yeah, it's a part of a collection. So I think it's out of copyright. So I'm pretty sure you can just read it online.
You can find it free.
I did. I just
a
found it.
lot.
I'm gonna look it up for the year, but the bigger question, not so much the story. The story was just kind of amazing, but the discussion, because for me that was one of the earliest. I'm just looking for the year now. Oh God, was it January 1892? Okay, so one of the earliest discussions about mental health, written by a woman.
I will say it was the reason I started writing. I was a journalist for a long time. I started writing journalism like in the late 90s, 1999, and then I started writing fiction in about 2008, and then I had my first son. And then I had a series of miscarriages. So I was suffering from really intense depression, and I stopped writing. So I believe after I published, it was after I published Poems of My Night with Raw Dog Screaming Press, I was like not there. I was gone mentally for like 4 or 5 years. And so somebody approached me and they were like, Cynthia, we've heard you haven't been doing well, and we've heard you've stopped writing because you're just not well. Would you like to write a story? We're putting together an anthology. And so what I wrote was a story called The Black Wallpaper. And I thought, because I just remembered how I was just not there. And I wanted to write about my own postpartum and depression. And I wrote a story about a woman that not only kills herself, but she killed her newborn and her husband. And it was that story that turned everything back on for me in 2019, and since then I've just been going. And so I think it was, at least for me, tapping into the yellow wallpaper was a way of saying, I'm not well, but I'm going to pull myself out of this, and I'm going to tell the world why I don't feel well. And it was a way to open it up for me.
Oh, for sure. I think that for me, it is just, of course, when you introduce people to it, they're always like, oh my gosh, you like that? I found it so liberating. It was very helpful to be able to lean into my own crazy. And I can call it that because it's mine, right? The whole postpartum depression, the idea that that you will be confined away from yourself, where you don't have any freedom. And the only agency that she had in that story was to succumb to her insanity. And so the lady in the wallpaper was already free. She was able to do whatever she wanted to do. Remember, she could come in and out the house. She was all in the garden and stuff. And so the young mom was like, you know what? Well, if that's how we get to be free, that's what I'm going to do. And so I think that it brings up a really, really good way to talk about the ways that mental health can affect us, especially when it is attached to things like hormones and childbirth, and, things that women are experiencing. And so I think that being able to say, like you say, Sina, I'm not well, but I'm going to be okay. even if it is through me escaping through this wallpaper to go hang out with my homegirl that's already out in the garden. Like we can just be garden spirits together. I thought that was a happy ending. Of course, my students argue with me all the time, and they're like, "No, Professor Rhonda, that's not happy." But I'm like, "Listen, she is free.
Yes.
Freedom
Yes.
is always happy."
In my story, the unwell mother, the husband was like, "Did you wallpaper the nursery?" And she did. And she like wallpapered everything black. And she was just kind of, she just leaned into it. And I think that's what I did. I leaned into it. And I think part of our greater conversation is we've all just leaned, we've just gone into the horror, into the horror of what it means, what, you know, what interests us, what it means to be us, you know, even thinking about, Lisa, when you said when people choose not to have children, that's their choice. But then there are other people that try to ask them about it. And it's like, well, not only are we picked apart from what we look like, but what we do with our own bodies.
Yeah, exactly.
It is wild to me that complete strangers think that they can ask, and they think it's perfectly okay to ask a woman anything about her looks or her interior workings. It's like, that's part of the horror of being a woman.
You know, and the thing I do know, I mean, I definitely will read the yellow wallpaper and the black wallpaper too. Because you know I love your stuff. I don't know how I missed that one. One of the things too is that there's such a disrespect for women and their reaction. Even still, today, I watched a thing talking about how many women are having heart attacks and they're not being taken seriously because, and then the doctor got on and said, you know, our hearts are smaller than men. The way physically, and that the way it may show itself in, you know, maybe different, whatever the situation is, we're not respected. And so even though I haven't done these, I did have a miscarriage after my first son. And what my doctor basically told me was, well, 20% of divorce, they end in miscarriage, you'll be fine. Because I had one son already. He was like over 10 pounds, so he was fine. And you'll be fine, you can have another baby. And out the office I went. And I never even knew anything of what he was talking about. All I knew is that I had already planned for this baby. So many months I had already fitted into my family, and I shut down. You know, I just shut down, and I was home taking care of my son. He was 2, I think. I fed him, I kept him clean, I kept him safe, but emotionally I was gone. I was dead. And the only thing that broke me out of it is one day, and I mean, he is not going to remember this at 2, but I'll never forget it. One day, he was standing in front of me, and I was sitting, and he just slapped me and said, "I hate you." And it was like waking out of a nightmare or something. Like I suddenly realized not only did I have to keep him clean, keep him safe, you know, but I had to reconnect. That feeling of him saying, "I hate you," was because I had turned into a zombie, basically. So
yeah, and that's one of the things that that I think that the yellow wallpaper did. It was really well before its time, especially to have come out so boldly. I even listened to like the radio show productions of this, like from the on the radio shows. They had oh, I can't think of her name right now. The lady that used to play the mom in Dora on Bewitched. Agnes Moorehead. Yeah, she did a really, really good audio version of that for the old time radio shows. And every single time I hear it, I'm always struck by the way that that brought a visibility. It brought visibility to, you know, the way that we sometimes feel like these are things that we're not supposed to talk about. We're not supposed to talk about our miscarriages. We're not supposed to talk about being sad after we have our kids. We're not supposed to talk about how we keep our children. You know, at one point I had my kids all clean. They were fed, like you say, Linda, they were wonderful. But if you looked at me, I wasn't eating, I wasn't showering, I wasn't sleeping. But my kids, they were taken care of, right? And so I think that that's one really important thing that that story did for us, was that it gave us this launch pad to kind of talk about, hey, listen, wait now, this ain't all, rainbow and glitter for everybody. Some of us, we have these other things going on. And what you should not do is just lock us away in a room and pretend you don't hear us, to not believe us, to talk to us like these doctors talk. What you should probably do is listen when we say to you that something's not right. I'm always so just incensed that her husband's a doctor. And I'm like, you're a terrible doctor because you did not even listen to her. You suck.
That I think that is it, isn't it? It's the inconvenience of women, I mean, I think before that, I think it's because it was written by a woman from a woman's perspective, say, compared to, well, no, even if you think back and you think of Jane Eyre, Mr. Rochester's mad wife, in the attic, and it's just an inconvenience. If you're not towing the line and conforming, then you're either, shunted off to the convent or stuck in the attic. And here we have a woman's perspective. And I think it was groundbreaking for that reason. We are getting inside her head and understanding that all she wants is agency and freedom, and she the only way she can find it is a tragic way. So and again, just lends it so beautiful, so well to I need to read Sina's story because I'm sure it's amazing. Now I want to rush off and read it straight away. But it is interesting. Again, I feel like there's a pivot, there's a pivot there in that time period, and I think we're at that pivot now, going from simmering to outright rage. That's what I think we're in now.
And what Lisa was talking about as far as like, who's reading our work is women, but I think a lot of times, yes, but also because what we're writing about is our own experiences, right? And a lot of women can relate to everything that we've been through. I mean, that's why I love to read. I like the thrillers, the women thriller, like Megan Abbott, it's like horror, really, but it's under a different, subgenre or whatever you want to call it, but it's thriller, but it's still, to me, it's still horror. And those cozy mysteries that, I can go through those in like a day. It's great. But they're all written by women, and they all have female characters, strong female character leads who, feel pain, they feel love, all the things that we go through and we experience. And I think that's why I love reading those stories so much, is because I know it's like, yeah, I've been through that, or, it just feels real, feels genuine, I guess. Like I was saying about nuances, there's certain nuances that we as women know, and I think can get across when we're writing things that, certain, men can't always get. I don't know. Sometimes I can feel like when it's written by a man, I can tell, and other times I can't. So they're just really good, right, at their craft.
Yeah. Well, and if you immerse yourself in the company of the people that you're writing about, it helps a lot. So I think that a lot of those writers that, like how they have those little things on Twitter that talk about like men writing women, and then they're like terrible and egregious. You have to go, do you know any women? Like, have you ever seen any? Have you ever talked to any? Have you ever just spend time in their company? Because the way you're writing this, it doesn't seem like you know any girls at all. Maybe you should stay away from that.
Assumption. It's writing from assumption.
Yeah,
Rhonda.
yeah.
Think that I can't. That's where I say you're not respecting the fact that you're not that person.
Yes, yes.
I wrote a story about a woman in a wheelchair, and immediately I knew I was out of my land because I've never been in a wheelchair. I went on blogs, I read blogs from people who are in wheelchairs, and one of the big things I remember, and it's not like everybody, because everybody's not the same, right? All Black women don't do this, all this, that, the other. But one of the things that would impress me was reading in the blog where the more than one person was angry that people looked at them and thought all they wanted was to be able to walk. That was their biggest dream and inspiration was to walk.
Wow.
Instead of being a human that had dreams and inspirations, that had things they wanted to do, that was the overriding thing. Why? Because we walk and we think, oh, if I can't walk again, that's the end of all things. So it's making assumptions about whoever you're writing about when it's not you. That is a good way to go wrong.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, we have crossed the hour point. I can't believe it. I would have loved to continue this conversation. Oh God, it was such a good one. I mean, I think we could have talked
We
for
could go
much
on. Yeah.
go on and
We
on
didn't
and
even get to
on.
talk about movies.
Right.
No.
Maybe you're right. Honestly, I think you know, we definitely have come to some conclusions though that we're sort of on the rise, and this is our moment, and this is good. Let's keep it going, right? But that there've been some foundations been laid for centuries already that we can stand upon and say, yeah, you know, this has been said. I'm going to say it a different way. You know, I'd like to talk about it more because it was already expressed and nobody really heard me. You know, and that I wonder sometimes about that. I guess as we close, one last question. I can't help myself. Do you go out of your way to include strong women in your own work because you want people not only to see themselves, but because that would indicate you're only writing these stories for women readers, but that you want anyone and everyone to know that these type of women exist. Like whatever character Linda's playing only wants to kill, that's a real thing. Sometimes when I'm writing, you know, my psychological horror it's you know, it can be quiet sometimes. Mine is not always so quiet, but if I've written a couple of quiet pieces, I've tried to make sure I put something really disgusting in one of the next one because people start to think I don't write that, and that's not true. I absolutely do. You know, so do you find yourself saying, you know, I've got not that you're going to write everything for everybody, but you want to make sure that you express that we are all different, much like we were just talking about. Not all Black women are the same. Not all anybody's the same as anything, which is an issue I have with some sensitivity readers, by the way, just putting that out there. Or the concept of sensitivity reading, that it's going to be a blanket. But anyway, that's another panel, isn't it? I just want to know from your perspective, do you go out of your way to make sure that you are representing strong female characters so that the world can know that they exist?
I think my horror is starting to pivot more quiet. So the novel I submitted a couple of weeks ago and my last two novels are very quiet horror, and the main women character, I have agoraphobia, and I know, yes, you see me out in the world and panels and I'm very animated, but when I come home, I'm probably like under a blanket for a week or two because I turn it on. So I do have agoraphobia. So my last few main characters have been agoraphobics, and so it's been that from that perspective. So it's been very quiet. My first, Children of Chicago is a more stronger female character, is a little meaner, but I think my most recent female characters are more like introspective. And I don't know why that is, but that's just where I'm going with my writing.
Me, I don't feel like I go out of my way to write strong female characters. For me, it's always like story. Oh, I've got a good story idea. And somehow the character usually almost always ends up being the lead character is a woman. And I think that's just where is my safe space. But you know, I mean, I write short stories and stuff in the voice of men, but as the main characters. But my longer pieces, I want to say, are mostly female characters, and I don't do it on purpose. It's just a matter of story for me.
Yeah, I flip around a lot. I mean, I always have, because my attention is easily distracted. So what happens for me is that, and I'm not conscious of it so much now, but I remember being more conscious of it many years ago, that if the main character was female, then the next thing I write, I want it to be male. I want just something different. I just want something different. And now I don't even think too much about it. Although I still like to have a balance because I'm always curious of the world from different points of view. And again, I was the oldest of 9. I had 7 brothers. I knew more about being a guy when I got out of high school than a girl. So, because I was in my house, it was like Lord of the Flies in the house with the boys. So that's what I think I do. But one of the things that I was writing down when I was listening to you, Lisa, is that one of the things I don't think I do, and I've only heard this back from people who've read my stuff, is that I don't believe in victims. So I don't believe that women are victims. I don't believe in, for my writing, that Black is a victim. I mean, I do believe people are victimized. So I will write what a person's going through when they're being victimized, but pretty much by the end of that, yeah, they're not the one that's hurting as much, whether it's psychological or physical. So, I think if you write authentically from what drives you, Rena was talking about story, and everyone else has mentioned different things about being authentic. Well, if you're writing authentically from what drives you and that you feel comfortable with, even when you try to go somewhere else, again, I agree with that 100%, then you're going to write what matters to you. When I was mentoring a young poet, and they were very concerned that were they representing their culture. And I said, you shouldn't worry about that. You should be writing from what you feel. What is making you angry, pissed off, da 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 da. If you're writing that, it's gonna come through you, your skin, your culture, your everything. So that is not, and I kind of believe in that in general, to write from what's authentically getting to you.
Oh my God, she's so fierce, isn't she? For me, I agree with everyone. It's what serves the story. It's the point of view that serves the story. You choose the character and you do your research and all the rest. But and before the Black Cranes movement, I was not really writing me, and I hadn't seen much of me in any fiction, and so I just think that was just such an eye-opener for me to have those other women saying, I feel this. And, and we're this group of Asian women and we're all so different, but we also have these things that underpin our experiences that are in common. And I don't know, I'm not as brave as Linda is and sort of be that fierce pioneer that goes out on her own. And so now I have to say the last 5 years has almost entirely been looking at women's stories and my story in the context of those other stories and how, we're connected. And that sisterhood has just been so uplifting to me. And this sisterhood, of horror writers have given me permission and allowed me to be me and write myself into the story. And that for an Asian woman is one of the bravest things. I sometimes I still can't believe that I've been allowed to be part of this movement. Sinner, I think I've heard you say similar things. I'm the first Latina woman. How can that be? How can that how can that be? It's not like those.
Right. How did it take this long?
I know, that's exactly how I feel. Like, what? Little me, why? And I think it just needed sometimes these catalysts, people like Linda and Rena. I met Rena when, I've said this before, but that first time I came to a StokerCon and there was Rena, she was like doing it. I was going, oh my God, there's a place for me here. I can see this would, and I think that just that representation and being given permission to have that voice and say something that was authentic to me was so important. And I'm so grateful. I really am. I'm going to cry. I am so grateful for these women and this group, this community that's let me do that. So yeah, I'm being more authentic by allowing myself to put myself in the story just a little bit, even from that point of safety, which fiction is, right? There's that little bit of safety. So yeah, I'm very grateful, and long may it last. So.
What's funny about that is I write mostly from a male perspective, but my male characters have a better understanding of women because I so therefore. All right. thank you so much, guys. I don't want to wrap. I don't want to, but it's getting late now. It's just long. And if we start another question, we'll go another 30 minutes. So sadly.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
I'm
Thank
excited to have done
you.
this. Let's go around the room real quick. Linda, where can we find you?
LindaAddisonWriter.com. And I gotta shout out. There's 4 anthologies that are on the preliminary ballot that I'm in. So Shakespeare Unleashed,
Yeah.
Death, Brown Spirits, Joe R. Lansdale, the drive-in multiplex, and God help me, Michael Bailey.
Qualia New?
Yeah, that one.
Don't go with my pronunciation. I could be wrong. Listen, that's fine.
It's better than what I was getting ready to say. So
awesome. Rena, where can you find you?
RenaMason.inc, INK, and social media, even though I'm not there that much now. It's been great.
I love that. Lee, how about you?
LeeMurray.info is where you'll find me.
Awesome. Rhonda?
RhondaJacksonJoseph.com. And I still lurk on social media. I just don't play on there a lot. I just haven't been feeling it. So I'm usually there on different platforms at rjacksonjoseph.
Cina?
CynthiaPelayo.com. Social media, I'm there, but I'm just posting updates. We're writing. That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
We're writing. So find us at CynthiaPelayo.com.
Yeah. And I'm at elmariewood.com. Thanks again, my friends, for having such a good conversation. I hope people got something from it. I can't imagine that they didn't. This was a great discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.